Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Welcome to Season 4, my friends, of the Pilates Lounge Podcast. This is a space for movement lovers, Pilates educators, and Pilates professionals who want to think a little bit deeper about the work we do. My name's Katie Crane. I've been teaching Pilates for over 20 years, and along the way, I've worn many hats: studio owner, teacher trainer, mentor, and lifelong student of the work we do. I'm also a surfer, an adventurer, a mum, a busy wife, and someone who believes that movement is by far more than exercise. On this podcast, we talk about Pilates as a practice, not just what we do on the mat or on the equipment, but how Pilates shapes the way we move, teach, lead, and live our lives. We explore anatomy, health, business, culture, and the evolving identity of Pilates in the modern world. This is a place for honest conversations, lived experience, and perspectives that respect both the lineage of Pilates and the people practicing it today. So thank you so much for being here. Let's dive into the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. This episode is just with me, just you and myself. I wanted to come to you today and discuss a topic that I see my own students struggling with all the time. And it's actually something that I struggled with for a long, long time. I feel like it definitely takes us making mistakes with bodies, really learning about our own body, and seeing what works with people's bodies over and over and over again before we can really become confident and before we can really resonate with some of this work. It's okay if you are still using these cues, and it's totally okay if it takes you a long time to start to change the way that you teach. Even after 20 odd years of teaching, I'm constantly checking in on the language that I'm using, the cues that I'm using, the way that I'm presenting things to my clients. And not only am I often questioning whether or not what I'm doing is working, whether or not what I'm doing is appropriate, but I'm asking for feedback from my clients at the same time as continuing my own education. Something that I want to remind you is, no matter how you are teaching today, that way that you are teaching is going to change over and over and over again. You're going to continue to refine the way that you teach. You might even come back to some ways that you approach things. And as your understanding deepens, and if you stay curious, then your teaching can only ever get better. Ultimately, there's no wrong or right way. There's just the right way or the best way for you today. So you could even scrap that right or wrong. So let's say there's no right or wrong. There's just the best way that you can teach today. And that best way in 5 years' time is no longer going to be the best. In 5 years' time, you're going to look back on the way that you are teaching today and thank your lucky stars that the clients are still with you, have stayed with you. That's exactly what happened to me. I've still got clients that were with me 20 years ago. And every time I come home from a workshop or every time I've invested in more learning, we always have a good chuckle about just how far we've come together in our understanding of the body and how much I have progressed and improved in my language, in the way that I cue, and in my capacity to teach multiple people in the room and really tap into language that works for them. Because part of the way that we teach, or part of the reason that some things work and some things don't, is because we're speaking to such a multitude of different people, and people that we see have different ways of understanding their own body, and they already have different preconceived ideas. So we're trying to interpret what they need in the moment so that then we can serve them. And it doesn't always land exactly how we want. But today's session is specifically on how we can cue the body so that people are aware of how their muscles work without having to actively cue muscle contraction. And I did a reel on this on my Instagram just this morning, which is why I'm jumping on here and doing this podcast right now while it's front of mind. And I talk about this with my own students all the time, face to face, when I work with them. Imagine this in your own mind. You go to pick up a coffee cup, or in the Instagram post, I had a cup of coffee or a cup, and I was picking up the coffee pourer and pouring coffee into the cup. And while I was doing it, I was talking to my bicep and my triceps to get them to activate so that I could pick up that coffee pourer and pour the coffee. Well, it's a ridiculous notion, isn't it? To even think that it's not like I pick something up and I say, okay, bicep, okay, triceps, let's go, guys, let's switch on and pick up this coffee pour and pour the coffee cup. We never do that. Yet I hear in the Pilates studio all the time people cueing, switch on your core before you do whatever exercise it is. And I always wonder, why do we tell people to do that? Or even I hear people say, squeeze your glutes when you're extending your legs. Why do we say that if it isn't actually applicable in everyday life? To me, the magic of Pilates is that it improves function. But so if we are acting to help people improve their everyday function, shouldn't we be teaching them in a way that is functional? I've even heard clients say to instructors in the room when I'm teaching, okay, so when I go walking, I'm going to practice switching on my glutes. Can you imagine walking along the beach or walking down the walking track, actively trying to engage your glutes or actively trying to engage your hamstrings because somebody has told you that they don't work properly? Hey friend, thanks so much for listening. Did you know that you can now find us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Pilates Professional? Now, if this episode resonates with you, please share it with someone else who would benefit from hearing it. Back to the show. I don't know about you, but if I tried to actively switch on my glutes when I'm walking, I wouldn't be getting very far. It would completely mess up my coordination of walking altogether, and I'd end up just kind of standing there and trying to switch on my glutes. But I certainly wouldn't be walking, or I wouldn't be walking naturally. So in my mind, when we are telling people to actively engage muscles to perform an exercise or to perform a movement or before they perform a movement, then we're actually inhibiting the natural process of that movement. So, and don't worry, I get it. I've been there. I spent probably my first few years telling people to engage their core or squeeze their glutes or activate their hamstrings. Even as I'm saying this right now to you, the memory is so close to me. So I must have done it for a long time before I understood the body better. So I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm here to help you progress in your teaching. So how do we help our clients get muscles working that may not be working well inside the studio so that then they are working well outside the studio? This is how I do it, and play around with it. let me know how you go. I would love your feedback so that you can tell me, am I hitting the mark for you or am I way off? I'm totally open to you giving me that feedback. But this is the way that I cue it, is more about be aware of, or do you sense? So I'm inviting the client to bring awareness to their own body so that they can feel how things work rather than telling them to switch something on. So, for example, if we're doing a plank or if we're doing 4-point kneeling, then I might say, can you feel how your core structure supports your body in this movement? And if they're really struggling with it, instead of getting people to switch on muscles, I might put my hands on them, get them to really think about where their bones are sitting. So, for example, let's take that plank position. I might get them to change a little bit the position of their pelvis, the position of their rib cage, make sure that they're not hanging down in their shoulders so that their core muscles actually are working along with their shoulders, their leg muscles. I mean, the plank itself is a full body integration, so the entire body is working. But for me, it's more about people understanding where their body is in space to make sure that the appropriate muscles are working to support their body, rather than telling them to switch a muscle on to get that muscle to do its job. If we took, for example, hamstrings, you can try this sitting, standing, supine, and even in a quadruped position. I get people to focus on pressing energy out through the heel, so the very back of the heel, right kind of where the back of the heel, it becomes that attachment point for the Achilles tendon. I'll often put my finger just up against that part of the calcaneus, the heel, and get the person to push into my finger with their heel. That gets the hamstring connected because that joint is the very start of the back line that the hamstrings are connected to. So when I'm teaching, if anything, I'm teaching people from the perspective of how the body works as a whole, and I'm making sure that that entire sling, so to speak, so for example, if it's hamstrings, those hamstrings are part of an entire sling that include or grow out of the calcaneus, up through the Achilles, up through the gastro, up through the soleus, the hamstrings, in through the ischial tuberosities, the sits bones, up through the deep spinal muscles, and right to the back of the skull. So I might either get them to actively press into the foot bar, into the floor, into my hand with the back of their heel, and or through the back of their skull. So those two end points of that whole back line. And that actually most often will help get the hamstrings engaging where they might not have been. Partly because the hamstrings are part of that massive system. And sometimes, say, if it's hamstrings or glutes, some of that system may be overworking, which then makes the part of that sling or system underwork. So if I can bring awareness to that whole line of muscles or that whole line of fascia or however it is that you see the body, then that can help activate. But I'm never cueing switch on your hamstrings. I'm always finding ways, how can I use the equipment? How can I use a prop? Or how can I use the environment to help people feel those muscles working rather than actively switching them on? So let's come back to the core again. Say if you're laying on your back, if you've got people laying supine, their knees are bent, feet flat on the floor, as if you're about to do some of the pre-Pilates or foundational mat work, for them to understand their core Sometimes I will say something like, imagine as you're laying on your back, between your hip bones, which you and I both know are your ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. But I never say that to clients because that's stupid to say that to clients. But between those headlights, I call them, your ASIS, and just above your pubic bone, imagine that I've put a brick right there. Now I want you to take a breath in, and as you breathe out, imagine that another brick has been placed on top of that first one. And every time you breathe out, imagine that another brick and another brick is stacked onto one another, and feel the weight of that brick in between those bones. And underneath that is part of your deep abdominals. Can you feel how they work? Now, keeping that feeling of the heaviness of that brick sitting right there, as you exhale, start to float your leg off of the floor. So you bring your leg into tabletop. And as you float your leg off of the floor in tabletop, I imagine that there's a balloon tied around the knee, and that balloon is full of helium floating to the ceiling. So I give all of these cues to try and alleviate hip flexors from taking over, try and engage the core without actively saying, switch off the hip flexors or switch off the core. Only with the idea that when you're out in the wild, never in a million years do you ever actively switch on muscles to do anything. So from a learning perspective, in my mind, and you could argue with me, that's totally fine. You don't have to agree. I'm just sharing with you what I've learned over the years. But there's very few people that you need to get to actively engage muscles for them to work. There are so many other ways around it. And a lot of it comes down to understanding joint placement, understanding their own body within the environment to get that to happen. That's it for now. Just a short one, an idea that came to mind. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. You'll be hearing from me soon. Have a great day. And that's a wrap, my friend. Now, before you go, make sure you check out the show notes. That's exactly where you'll find anything we're offering alongside this very episode, and the link to subscribe to the Pilates Muse newsletter. Our subscribers receive free handouts and resources connected to the topics we explore right here. They're specifically created for Pilates professionals, movement educators, and Pilates lovers just like you. So, until the next episode,